Hello and welcome to the Winner Winner podcast by Welcome, where we speak with the Democratic Party candidates who prove they can win the middle, beat Republicans on Trump turf, and recalibrate the party to where the median voter is. Here at Welcome, we work to strengthen a centrist faction that wins and governs responsibly. We support centrist Democrats running in Trump districts through Welcome Pack. Today, I'm super excited to be in conversation with Christina Bohanan, who's running for Congress in Iowa's 1st Congressional District. She's running against Republican Marionette Miller Meeks, one of the Republican Party's biggest underperformers. Miller Meeks won the district by just 6 votes in 2020, and she lagged the top of the ticket by 11 points in 2024. Christina ran for Congress in 2022 in a previous iteration of the district and went back for a rematch against Miller Meeks in 2024 when she came up short by just 798 votes, the second closest race in the country. In her 2024 congressional campaign, Bohannan made a point to meet constituents in rural areas where voters had not seen or heard from Democrats in years. She also was able to differentiate herself by opposing Democratic policies that were not popular, like student loan debt cancellation and calling on President Biden to drop out of the race. This helped her achieve the strongest overperformance of any other Democratic challenger in the country, outperforming Harris by 8.2% and running 11.3 points ahead of a generic Democrat in her district. All of this has put her in a great position to flip this crucial seat for her rematch against Miller Meeks in 2026. Iowa 1 has a Cook PVI of R+4, and Trump won the district by 8 points in 2024. The district is on the DCCC's Districts and Play list, a possible precursor to Red to Blue. Christina, welcome to the Winner Winner Pod, and so nice to chat with you today.
Great to be here. Thanks.
So, Christina, can you tell us more about you, your background, your upbringing? Did you always want to run for office when you were older? You have a distinctly working class background and upbringing that you talk about often. So how does it provide the contrast that we don't often see from Democratic Party challengers and candidates?
Yeah. Well, so, no, I did not think I was going to run for office. When I was growing up, my family was not political at all. I mean, honestly, we never talked about politics around the table. I mean, honestly, we were just talking about working in the yard, getting things done, what's wrong with the lawnmower this week? That's literally the kind of stuff we were talking about. Both of my grandmothers lived with us. And so we were taking care of them. And, we had a full plate, we were working hard just to get by. And I think that's where a lot of people are today. And, politics is not front and center on their minds, and nor should it be. We've got lives to lead, right? And so I think that that's one of the reasons why I really connect with people, because I don't think everybody needs to, live and breathe politics. But what I will say is that there comes a time when politics and your everyday life collides, right? And that happened with me when my dad, who had worked hard all his life, neither of them graduated high school, my mom and dad. He was a construction worker, worked in the hot sun every day. And then after years and years, 20, 30 years, he got sick with emphysema. And after a while, the insurance company just canceled his insurance. They just canceled it. It didn't matter that he was sick, didn't matter what was going on with him, didn't matter he'd worked hard his whole life. And then, what happened was then he had a pre-existing condition and he couldn't go out and get other health care. And so we literally lost everything trying to keep him alive and afford the prescription drugs. And so, I think that's what the first time that my family realized that, something's going on here. And we looked at politics, and that was before we had Obamacare, before the Affordable Care Act protected people with pre-existing conditions. And, my dad was kind of like the poster child for, why we needed that. And I think that was the first time that I realized that, politics really do matter in our everyday lives. And so that stuck with me, and after some years, I started to see that working people, again, were really struggling. And we had politicians who were not putting working people first, who were, consistently putting, extreme party loyalty or corporate PAC money or, billionaire contributions or whatever ahead of the people that they were supposed to represent. And it boils my blood. I'm going to tell you, based on how I grew up and how I saw people working hard and still struggling with this stuff, I said, no, that's not right. And so that's why I stood up to run for office, ran for the state house first, ran against a 20-year Democratic incumbent, won that by 32 points, and then ended up running for Congress to fight for the same things.
That is remarkable. You mentioned healthcare, and it's awesome because healthcare is the one area where Democrats have the advantage among voters. Voters trust Democrats with healthcare more than Republicans, obviously so. What do you think are some other areas that Democrats could begin to regain the trust among voters over Republicans?
Yeah, I think that's a really good question. And honestly, I think we're at a moment now where we might start to see some of that turn. Healthcare is a huge one. There's no question. I mean, what the Republicans have been doing on healthcare, cutting Medicaid, cutting these ACA subsidies, those things are hurting people right here in Iowa. I mean, not only we've got an average 60-year-old couple in my district is going to see their premiums go from $600 a month to more than $2,000 every single month. How are people supposed to afford that? Out of the blue, now they have to pay that. That is just outrageous. And so a lot of them are going to stop you having healthcare altogether. And I think that that's going to be a huge, huge issue in this election. Also, though, things like education, I do think that we have some real trust there among the voters. We need to make sure that we are making sure that our schools work for everybody, that teachers are safe in the schools, and that we deal with achievement gaps and things like that. But I think that's an area where people fundamentally believe that Democrats are with them with public education. And recent attacks on teachers. Miller Meeks has come out and attacked teachers in congressional hearings, ridiculed them. She voted to cut 100,000 teacher jobs, and she voted for one of the biggest voucher bills to send public school money to private schools, even bigger than what the state of Iowa has done right here within the state. So, I think that's an area. And I think fundamental affordability, I think that we can really come out here because of the tariffs. Look, the fact is, people in my district, I'm going to tell you right now, look, they voted for Trump. They voted for Trump by 8 points. But everywhere I go, I hear people say they voted for him to bring costs down and to secure the border. Bring costs down, secure the border. We are seeing everything but that, right? Driving up costs on everything. First of all, with all of these tariffs across the board, it's killing our farmers here in Iowa. The tariffs and then the resulting trade war with China, which is our biggest market for soybeans, it's just killing us. And the amazing thing is, it was the farmers and Republican governors like Terry Branstad who worked for years to cultivate that relationship with China and build those markets for our farmers. And it's been pulled out from under them in one fell swoop here. So that is huge. And I think that that's a real problem for people like Miller Meeks, who's voted 3 times to support those tariffs. And just the continual support of corporations over people, corporate price gouging, lack of competition among agricultural markets. Those have been really tough for our farmers over the last several years as well. And, Miller Meeks isn't standing up to those corporations. They're padding her campaign accounts, So I think those are things that we can really, go on. Affordable housing as well. So I think that there's a set of issues that are really front and center right now for people around affordability in a variety of different ways that we can really come out swinging and say that Marionette Miller Meeks and Congress and the Trump administration are not doing what they promised.
Absolutely. And I'm sure voters are really frustrated and looking to you for some solutions. Providing that contrast, obviously, you mentioned Miller Meeks not supporting farmers and the trade agreements and everything. But one thing that I did note in my research before this was that she also doesn't host town halls. She doesn't meet with voters. What are some other areas that have caused her to be this tremendous underperformer? And, why do you think voters are ready to truly send her packing this cycle?
Yeah, her favorability is incredibly low. I think I heard someone say the other day that her favorability is lower than any other member of Congress who hasn't directly been involved in a scandal. So she's had to work really hard to become this unfavorable. And I think that look, here's what it is. This is all personal. Politics, so we talk about politics, and numbers and favorability. This is personal. And what we know is that Miller Meeks has consistently just refused to be accountable to people. She does not believe fundamentally that she represents anyone in the district who does not agree with her. Let's start with that. I mean, literally, she plays to her base. The people who agree with her, she'll talk to. She doesn't want to talk to anyone else. She doesn't represent anyone else. I cannot tell you how many people have told me that they went all the way to Washington, D.C. to meet with her about an issue. They walked into her office, and within 3 or 4 minutes, she just said, well, we're not going to agree about this. There's no point in talking. And she walks out.
Yikes.
her constituents who traveled all the way to DC to see her. That's just unbelievable. People that she refuses to talk to here, people who, ask for a meeting or call her office or send an email. They get these, so many people have forwarded me her responses to their questions, and they are complete non-responses. They're like these stock answers that aren't even answering the question that they asked. And then when people do ask for a town hall, when she's been taking all of these terrible votes that are really disastrous for a district like ours that are like, just hardworking people, right? I mean, my district isn't full of billionaires and corporate CEOs or pharmaceutical execs, and she keeps voting their way every single time. So of course people are going to say, hey, talk to us. Why are you taking these votes? Why are you hurting us? And she literally said, I will hold a town hall when hell freezes over.
Yikes.
That was her answer. I'll hold a town hall when hell freezes over. And that got out, and she was so, people were so angry with her that she finally decided she needed to have one. And the town hall was just lie after lie, misrepresentation. And people were so angry that they booed and heckled her off the stage. I mean, she has had to work very hard to become this unfavorable, but she's managed it. So, I think that people are absolutely ready for a change, not just because of the policies that she's supported, which are devastating for Southeast Iowa, but also for the way that she conducts herself in this office and for her total lack of accountability to the people that she took an oath to represent.
Absolutely. I love how you phrase that too, like just lack of accountability. So thinking about some of the policy again, like you're a policy girly. Tell me more about your intentions when you get to Congress. What do you want to focus on? I have in my notes that you've worked to strengthen congressional ethics rules, limit conflicts of interest, restore public confidence in government. So what are some of the bills that you're like, look, I'm jazzed and I got this, or I've already got this written up, right? I'm just ready to get there, right?
So a few things. I mean, first of all, just to go to your point, I think it is so important right now that we reinstill confidence in our government. I mean, confidence in Congress is at an all-time low. People just fundamentally do not believe that members of Congress are there to serve the public, are there to put people first. And they have a point, right? I mean, so many members of Congress, frankly, of both parties, let's be honest, they do what their corporate PACs want. They do what their special interest groups want. They do what their donors want. Sometimes they let party loyalty get completely carried away on both sides. And so, we need to elect people who are very, independent minded, in the middle, trying to work with both parties to get things done for people, and who are not just kind of constantly beholden to what their party leaders are telling them to do or what the special interests or the donors are telling them to do. If we don't do that, I am very worried about what's happening to our country because, if we lose confidence in government, people will completely check out and we will no longer have real democracy for the people by the people. And so, I think that that's really critical. And it also feeds into so many other issues that I want to work on, like affordability, like healthcare. Those are really important to me. The fact is that when you have representatives who are just taking tons of money from corporate PACs and special interests and from, their very wealthy and influential donors, then that's who they're listening to. That's who the representatives are hearing from. That's who they're listening to. And they're not focused on the people right there in their district. And I think this is just what has happened with Miller Meeks. Maybe she set out with good intentions. Maybe I want to give her the benefit of the doubt and say that when she went to Congress, she thought she was going to do some good things. But she has become so entrenched in the Washington, D.C. bubble and just listening to the people in her own party and listening to all of the people kind of on her side and shutting out all other voices and constituents that I don't even think she knows anymore what this district needs. I really don't. I don't think she fundamentally gets it anymore. And so I think that that's really important. And so that's something that we have to change if we want to tackle affordability, if we want to get rid of the tariffs, if we want to do some meaningful work on healthcare, which I really believe we can do now since there's been so much attention on like the Medicaid cuts and the ACA subsidy ending. I think that those are things that maybe there would be a real public appetite to really look at. But it's going to take standing up to your own party, including the Democratic Party, and working with the other party to get those things done.
Yeah, I love that you ended on standing up to your own party, because sometimes it's not just, like you said, the voters or your peers in Congress. Sometimes it's like the people who you're relying upon to be able to have a candidacy and run your race and get reelected. You mentioned special interests, but also that's just sometimes just regular donors, right? Obviously, as a congressional candidate, you spend a lot of time on the phones, talking to people, getting money. And obviously, guys, please give Christina some money because she's awesome. Please go to the Win the Middle slate and throw her some money. But how do you use the time that you spend with your voters and future constituents to really ground you? And also, how do you articulate your values so that you're not just talking to people who are automatically going to vote for you? You're talking to independent voters, you're talking to Republican voters. How do you win them over and ensure to them that you're going to be representing them and their interests versus like what Miller Meeks is doing now, which is just completely discarding them?
Yeah. Well, first of all, you've got to spend time in your district. And that means, not spending all of your time fundraising or, national travel to do fundraisers, but actually get out in the district. And, we did this just this past weekend. I went over to two of the counties in the furthest part of the district. These are heavily Republican areas. I sat down and did a 90-minute in-depth interview, open to everybody, with questions from the audience. It was streamed so that people could watch it online as well. And I covered, all kinds of territory, everything that has to do with our rural economy, with affordability, with healthcare, education, all of it. And it was amazing. Afterward, I had probably, I think, 4 or 5 people standing there to talk to me after we had finished. Every single one of them identified themselves to me as either a Republican or an independent. Every single one of them. And they wanted to tell me that they totally agreed with everything I had to say, because it was a very centrist message focused on the district, focused on what people need here. It wasn't the national talking points on either side. I was really getting into, in depth in the issues that they care about. And they said that they're tired of the chaos. They're tired of a representative like Miller Meeks, who is just putting all of the, political craziness ahead of everyday people. And so that's what you've got to do. You just meet people kind of where they are. And as a result of that kind of campaigning, we also are doing a ton of door knocking. Last cycle, we knocked way over 100,000 doors,
Wow.
and we'll continue. We're going to do even more this time. But, at the end of that, more than 30,000 Trump voters voted for me.
That's amazing.
That doesn't just happen. And at the beginning of this, you explained how I had outperformed the top of ticket and other Democrats on the ticket. Well, that's how you do it. That's how you have to do it. In a district that Trump won by more than 8 points, I have to have a lot of Trump voters vote for me. And I am very honored that they entrusted me with their votes. And I didn't change my story for them. I didn't change my values for them. But I think that they saw that, maybe they disagree with me on a little bit here and there, but they saw that I was not going to be the typical political establishment. They saw that I was going to be an independent voice for Iowa, that I wasn't going to be beholden to party politics and, to special interests and so on. And that's really what most people are asking for, people of all political parties, so that's what we're doing. We're doing even more of it this time. We've learned a lot over the course. Experience matters in this kind of campaigning. It's a very big district. My district is bigger than the state of Massachusetts. So, it takes time to get out to everybody, but we've built a very strong foundation in my previous races. And this time we are taking everything that we've learned and we're doing more and more and more. And so I'm really excited when I can get out there. And when I have a Republican or an independent voter come up to me and tell me that they agree with that just makes my day, because we have to bring people together. We have tremendous challenges in this country and tremendous opportunities. And we can't do any of that until we stop the craziness and the fighting and get back to trying to solve problems for real people.
I love the empathy in that, right? Like one of Welcome's big tenets is empathy, right? Because when you want to build a winning coalition, you have to be empathetic toward voters who either supported you in the past and voted for Trump, like you said, those 30,000. Shout out to you for getting 30K voters. That's incredible, Trump voters. But there are some Democrats who are like, you should rub in their faces, like, this is what you did when you voted for Trump, like, you voted against your interests. Like, what do you say to people when they have that approach? And how does your style of politics help the party actually regain the trust among voters like this?
I think that is not only a huge mistake. I think it is deeply disrespectful to people. I have heard that. I have heard some Democrats say, you're voting against your interests. Well, I think they can decide what their interests are. I think that's really, arrogant and disrespectful to say, here's what your interests should be, and you should vote these. What we have to do is really just talk to people and meet them where they are and listen more than lecture at them. And that's just what I've done. And I think part of it maybe is because I did grow up, the way that I did. I mean, like I said, we were not a political family at all. But if we had been, we might have been Republican. I think there's a very good chance. My hometown now is pretty strongly Republican. And so, I think I understand kind of where people are coming from. And the other thing is, I think it's really important that we have humility as representatives, that we don't have all the answers. I don't think that Democrats always get things right. I agree with a lot of traditional Republicans on some issues of fiscal policy and supporting business and things like that. You mentioned earlier on that I was opposed to giving student debt relief. I desperately want to bring down the cost of higher education and reduce student debt. But it just isn't fair to have hardworking people who didn't go to college, who are making less than a lot of college educated people, and then say, oh, but you need to spend your hard earned tax dollars to take away their college debt. That's just not fair. And it was a huge amount of money. It was not a small amount. It was a massive amount of money that would have been required to do that. So, that's just based on my experience here, with the district that I hope to represent. And I think that there are some other things that we need to look at as well within the Democratic Party. Reducing regulation, making sure that regulations are really needed, getting rid of the ones we don't need, keeping the ones we do, but making sure that, businesses can thrive and innovate here in this country. The infrastructure bill that we passed a few years ago was fantastic. It invested in roads and bridges and locks and dams here in my district on the Mississippi River, and also like broadband and things like that. But I am being told by broadband providers here, they have not seen $1 of that money, at least as of just a few months ago, because of all of the regulations and the hoops that they have to jump through to get it. That's been years since that money was appropriated. And those projects aren't happening yet, So I think that there are just things that we need to look at ourselves and make sure that that we're really putting everyday working families first and foremost in that, and not kind of tying ourselves in knots over things or doing things that are maybe unfair to working people while kind of privileging people who maybe already are in a pretty good spot.
Thinking about, putting district over party, what do you think are some of the areas where you're like, look, I got to vote with Iowa One on this, guys. I'm sorry if it, is disappointing to you, but like this is important to my district. What do you think it could be niche too. It could be like, related to like you're talking about infrastructure or water or anything. What are some places that you think could possibly be a position where you're going to have to put Iowans over the party?
Yeah. Well, so, things like, anything that's kind of privileging, college educated, sort of the wealthy people over working people. Look, we're uh, this is a district where I think the median income, household income is somewhere around, maybe $70,000 a year. We don't have billionaires and, corporations here, so I think that we're going to have to really think about, working families in all of this. And so, the student debt, was one of them. Party politics, as you said, I was the first red to blue candidate that called on President Biden to step aside after that debate. And, I had some people very angry with me about doing that. Later, they apologized and said that I was right. But at first people were very angry, but it's like, this again, you can't put your party ahead of what is clearly right for Iowa or for the country. And I think that that's, you just have to be willing to stand up to your own party. It's hard to stand up to your friends, but you have to be willing to do it. This is an important job, and a lot of people's lives are on the line. And so you've got to be willing to do that. Other things, look, I'm just going to say it. I'm going to support ethanol. You know, ethanol, I know a lot of people are not high on biofuels. There's a lot of criticism of the industry and everything. But listen, the alternative a lot of times is big oil. My opponent, Miller Meeks, she has taken over $200,000 from big oil. She just voted against year-round E15 gas, which is the ethanol gas. Even after, all of these groups had negotiated it, there was bipartisan support, it was ready to go. And then she stopped it again. This is a huge industry for our corn growers here in Iowa. And she just voted against it. And, I would support it. I totally agree on renewable energy and moving, toward a solution to climate change. That's actually a very important issue for me. And I think it's something we definitely have to do. But I don't think that a small state like Iowa's economy should be completely sacrificed for that when big oil is the one that's really out there, just kind of stopping everything to do with climate change. So that's just how I see it. And I will fight for that. I think that that's, always fighting for, kind of Iowa's economy and so forth, I think is going to be really important for me, creating jobs.
And I appreciate you pointing those out. And, one thing that I wrote on a welcome stack last year was how centrists in particular have to operate in courage, right? And it has to be depolarizing courage, right? There's all sorts of people who are doing crazy, nutty things and they're calling it courage. And it's really just their egos that they're stroking, right? So kudos to you again for operating courage, saying look, I know this might be contentious and controversial for some of y'all, but this matters to us. This is important to us. And like you said, you're not going to sacrifice the economy of Iowa for, appeasing people. What do you make of your ability and your candidacy, and even people that you plan to caucus with and do work with in Congress? What do you make of your ability to kind of flesh out and work the muscles of centrist courage so that people can not only trust Democrats, but also to believe that they are fighting for them and for the interests of them as, regular people, and also put to bed the thing that all moderates are just mushy. They don't believe in anything, right? You believe in a lot of stuff. So I know for a fact that that's not you, but there are plenty of moderates who are kind of mushy. So how do you flesh out the centrist courage that'll allow people to really take y'all seriously and respect your votes?
Yeah, well, I think that's a really good question, because I do think that a lot of people go to Congress with good intentions and they think that they can do these things, and then they get there and it's just way harder in these sort of interpersonal ways than they expect, even within their own caucus sometimes, and sadly, that's been the problem with Representative Miller Meeks, is that she has just absolutely, been told, you will vote the way that we tell you to vote. And I mean, she actually does believe a lot of this stuff. I mean, she has talked about cutting healthcare for years and years. It's unbelievable. But I also think that she, has just kind of fallen in line, frankly. And so I'm not going to do that now on the other side, and I think that it comes from a few things. First of all, I think the more time you spend in your district, the more time that you talk with people and hear their stories, that then gives you not only the inspiration to go and do what needs to be done there, but also it gives you the data. It gives you, when you're talking with your caucus and you're saying, well, listen, that's not what I'm hearing in my district. My district is XYZ. That gives you strength as a member to go in and say, no, let me tell you about my district. Let me tell you about what is happening there. If you don't have those stories, if you don't have that knowledge about your own district, and then you can't fight for them. So I think that's really important. I think surrounding yourself by people of different political viewpoints, I would hire a Republican on my team. I mean, I don't mind that. I think that having that debate and that dialogue is really good. And so, I think that's really important. So you're not just always hearing from kind of one side of things. I think that's critical. And frankly, the other piece is just confidence. I think that you've got to be confident in your beliefs, in your abilities. You can't get bullied or intimidated by whether it's your party leaders or whether it's lobbyists or whether it's the corporate PACs or special interests. Sometimes they'll say, "Oh, I need you to sign on to this thing." And I'm like, "No, I'm not doing that." We have some special interest groups who want you to sign on to all of these crazy positions and things. And you just have to say no. And sometimes that's hard when it's a big name national group that, you were fully expecting to endorse you. And then it turns out that, they want you to, you know, say things that are just not consistent with the people of your district. I mean, you have to have the confidence and the courage to say, no, I'm not doing that. And to stand up to the people like Marie, it had to do with this thing. I can't believe that they did Yelp reviews on her auto repair shop. That's doesn't seem to be the right place for that.
Crazy,
But
right?
I just think that we have to have confidence that what we're doing is right, and not to allow ourselves to be sort of intimidated or bullied or told that you're a bad person because you're not supporting this bill or that bill, or whatever. We have to be willing to just stand up and say, look, I know my district, I know my people, and this is not the right thing for my district.
I genuinely appreciate that because that's the leadership that we need. Like, we need this energy in Congress. So thank you in advance. And one thing that's been always just fascinating and frustrating to me equally is like the safe seat Democrats are like usually the loudest ones, right? And the ones who have nothing to lose because they don't have to win over Republican voters, they don't have to win over independent voters. And they're basically just unaccountable to people who are in the center of the country, not the center of the party. How does your representation in Iowa, bringing a Democrat to Iowa in this seat particularly, and the people that you're going to, like I said, caucus with, do work with, how does that bring the contrast that we need, particularly in Congress, to show like, hey, there's Democrats in these places and our voices should be respected and should be listened to because we are actually where the middle of the country is, where the country is voting, and helps the party regain prominence as we go into another presidential election.
Yeah, it's a great question. I think it's critical that we can elect some Democrats from some of these very difficult districts for a number of reasons. I mean, first of all, what I would say to my friends in these safe Democratic districts who might want to take further left positions is, if you want to win the majority and do anything for people, we got to win my seat. So don't tell me what we need to do here. You should be listening, right? Listening to what we're hearing in these kinds of districts, because these are the swing districts that are really going to make the difference. And my thing is, like, I'm not out here, I'm not running to make big statements and be, comment on the latest social media thing, or to, make these, far sweeping statements about, different issues. I want to win this election so that I can actually do some real good for the people of Iowa. That's why I'm in this. And so, we have to think about, why has the National Democratic brand become, so unpopular and so toxic? And, if we ever want to do anything for people again, that's something that we really have to reckon with. And we have to have those tough conversations within our party. And also, though, more importantly, I think in some ways is, we have to realize that, this intense polarization we have, where you have, Democrats in safe D seats and Republicans in safe R seats out there, just, with the vitriol and the yelling and stomping their feet and the name calling and the ugliness that's happening, is killing our country. I mean, it really is. And I will be honest and say, I wouldn't want my district to be a safe D district. I would not choose that, because this is really more the heart of the country. This is kind of the middle. It's a little right leaning right now, but it went for Obama twice. This is a classic swing district. This is where most Americans are. And I feel extremely privileged to be running in a district like that, because I feel like we get more at the truth, because we can see both sides of every argument. We can see how it's affecting people, and we can see kind of where most people really are. I don't want to be in a district that's a bubble, that doesn't really reflect the entire country. So I am privileged to run in a district like this. And I think that a lot of what we have to do, going back to kind of some of our earlier points there, like appealing, why Trump voters voted for me, like what am I doing to appeal to those voters? A lot of it starts with respect and saying like, look, I respect your position. I wouldn't want you to be anything else. I don't want this to be a safe D district or to be an super left leaning district. I just want to meet you where you are and hear what's happening in your daily life and see how I can hope to make that better. And I think that breaks down a lot of barriers. And, I think that's what we need to do. And I know I've heard from Marie, she kind of says something along the same lines, that we don't want to be judgmental and condescending, right? We need to start with respect. And so I just feel a tremendous sense of honor and privilege that I have the opportunity to run in a district like this one. And I wouldn't change it one bit.
You're on fire, my friend. That is beautiful. I'm so excited for you. Like, you don't understand. Like, this is awesome. You are so deserving of this seat. I hope that it really, really, this is your year. This is your year. So shifting gears a little bit, we talked about 2020 briefly, but Iowa, I don't even know at this point, first in the caucus, whatever country, whatever.
Hmm.
We'll see what happens this next cycle as they do the new states and whatever. But that all said, should Iowa remain in one of the first states that a presidential candidate has to win, what advice would you give to a Democrat who wants to not only win Iowa, but win your district?
In general, I don't even get into the caucus stuff because that's party stuff, that's kind of like what the party's doing and all that kind of, and I kind of stay out of that. I just want to talk to people, I'm not making this decision. But I will say this, because I do think this is kind of fundamental. We have been losing white working class voters for a long time. And my district is one of those classic districts that went for Obama twice and then turned around and voted for Trump 3 times. And so this is where we need to go to talk to people and to see what's really going on, and not to lecture them or tell them what they should want or what their interests are, but to actually hear from them, because there are reasons. There are reasons why people switched kind of from Obama to Trump like that. And a lot of them are legitimate reasons. And so, I think that you just have to hear that out, and reckon with that and be humble enough to say, yeah, like I get your point, maybe that wasn't the best thing for the Democratic Party to do, or the shift that we should have made, and things like that. And so I think that it's going to be really important for, presidential candidates, Senate candidates, me as a congressional candidate to, really just listen to people and take that in, and not try to, ram something down people's throats or tell them that they shouldn't feel the way that they do, or worse, that they're a bad person for feeling a certain way, or, that you're, because you want to secure the border, you're a racist. I mean, like that's ridiculous. I mean, of course we should secure the border. Every country tries to secure its border, And so I think that we just need to be like super straightforward about those things, and not try to, act like we're better than people, or be condescending or disrespectful for how people feel, because they have very legitimate reasons for some of these differences. But I do think that we can bridge that divide. I think one of the things that the reason why there were so many Bohannan Trump voters is because I think people largely supported Trump because he was not politics as usual, because he was not Washington establishment, because he said what he thought. And, and I think that people found that refreshing, and they're so tired of the way that our politics are. They've lost so much confidence in our government that they were willing to take a chance on something different. And I think that's where I come in, because I love my country. I don't want to be too sappy about it, but I'm telling you, I love my country. I always have. I am extremely patriotic. And I am running to reinstill confidence in our government, and to be a very different kind of representative who doesn't get bogged down in all of the money and the personal interest and just the career climbing and the special interests and all of that. I really just want to do a good job for the people of the first district. And I think that, anybody who's looking for something different like that, they need look no further, because that's what I bring to this. I think Trump has done some good things. I've agreed with him on a couple things. I would try my best to work with him and to work with the other party, and to work with my own party to bring those things together. And I think that's what people are looking for right now. Interestingly, I will say Iowa has some of the most split ticket voting of any state in the country. I mentioned it went from Obama to Trump, but even after it's shifted, there's a lot of down ballot split ticket voting. So even if people are voting for one party at the top, they are willing to vote for other parties down ballot. And that's what you see with me. It's Rob Sand has done the same thing, as the governor candidate here. And I think that's very common. And, Iowans are just good people who look at the person. And so a lot of people here really are not as beholden to party so much. And so I think that's a really good thing. And I love that about my state. I think that's fantastic. So I think that that is the kind of state we are. And that's the kind of candidate I am. And I think it makes me a good fit for this district.
So for the people who think that split ticket voters don't exist, you heard it here first. They're here in Iowa. We have a lot of
split ticket voters in Iowa.
I love it. Christina, you are absolutely wonderful. So enjoyed speaking with you. Thank you for your leadership, your candidacy, your authenticity, all of it. You are fantastic. And guys, please give Christina some money. Let's get her over the finish line. Let's make sure that she gets what she needs so she can take down Triple M in 2026, or it is in November. And yeah, let's keep this conversation going so that we can ensure that more candidates like Christina can win the middle. Thank you so much, Christina. I so appreciate you.
Thank you. Really appreciate this. And thanks to everybody who supported me. Let's do it.